She found a lost dog wandering in the rain, shivering and alone. What happened next would change her life forever. You've probably walked past a stray animal before. Maybe you stopped, maybe you didn't. But Sarah Martinez didn't just walk past that golden retriever on that cold November evening in Los Angeles. She couldn't. The dog was soaked, its collar expensive but muddied, tags jingling with each desperate shake. Sarah was just a waitress, living paycheck to paycheck, dreams of becoming a veterinarian buried under student loans and double shifts. But something about this dog made her stop everything. She knelt down in the puddle, ruining her only work pants. The dog looked at her with eyes that seemed to hold secrets. Have you ever felt like a single moment was about to change everything? That's what Sarah felt, though she couldn't explain why. The tag read, Max, with a phone number. Simple enough. She should have just called. But Max was limping, bleeding from his paw. Sarah made a choice that would cost her that week's grocery money. She took him to the emergency vet, $300. That's what kindness cost her that night. $300 she didn't have. The vet asked if she was the owner. She almost lied, almost said yes, because who spends their rent money on someone else's dog? But Sarah just shook her head and said what her grandmother always told her. Sometimes we're angels for others, even when we can barely fly ourselves. Max slept in her studio apartment that night on her only blanket. She tried calling the number. No answer. Again, nothing. She posted online, checked lost dog sites. 0 responses. What would you do? Keep trying? Give up? Sarah didn't know that across town, someone powerful was desperately searching for their best friend. Someone whose life was perfect on the outside but crumbling within. She didn't know that Max wasn't just any dog. She didn't know that his owner had been ready to give up on everything until this loss pushed them over the edge. All Sarah knew was that tomorrow, she'd try again. Because that's what good people do. They try again. 3 days passed. 3 days of Sarah sharing her meager meals with Max. 3 days of unanswered calls. 3 days that would lead to a collision of two worlds that should never have met. You know how the universe sometimes whispers before it shouts? Sarah's whisper came in the form of Max's peculiar habits. He wouldn't eat normal dog food. He sat on command in 3 languages. He perked up every time a luxury car passed by. This wasn't just any dog. This was someone's baby. Someone who had invested time, love, and clearly money into this beautiful creature. But where were they? Why hadn't they answered? Sarah's coworker at the diner, Rosa, noticed the exhaustion in her eyes. You can't save everyone, mija, she said, watching Sarah sneak leftovers into her bag for Max. But isn't that exactly what makes us human? The inability to stop trying? The 4th morning brought a breakthrough. Max suddenly started barking at the TV in the diner. Not just any bark, a specific excited recognition. Sarah turned to look. There on the morning show was a famous actress, tears streaming down her face, pleading for her dog's return. Alexandra Chen, Hollywood royalty, Oscar winner, and utterly, completely broken over her missing dog. Sarah's heart stopped. She looked at Max, who was now whimpering at the screen, then at the photo they were showing. It was him. Of course it was him. The universe doesn't do coincidences this big without a reason. But here's where Sarah's story takes a turn that no movie script could have written, because Sarah recognized something else in Alexandra's eyes, the same desperation she'd seen in her own mirror when her mother was dying. The same helplessness that comes when money can't fix what's broken. She could have called the TV station, could have demanded the huge reward being offered, $10,000. Enough to change her life, enough to pay off debts, maybe even return to school. What would you have done with that temptation? Instead, Sarah did something that would later make Alexandra Chen question everything she thought she knew about people. She looked up the actress's management company and left a simple message. I have Max, he's safe, he misses you, no reward necessary. Then she went back to work, serving coffee to people who would never know they were being waited on by someone who had just chosen character over cash, because that's what real heroes do. They pour coffee and save lives and never expect applause. The call came 2 hours later. Not from a manager or assistant, but from Alexandra herself, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. And that's when Sarah learned the first of many secrets that would bind these two women together forever. Please, I need to see him. Where are you? I'll come right now. Alexandra's voice cracked through the phone like breaking glass. This wasn't the polished celebrity from red carpets. This was raw, unfiltered desperation. You might think famous people don't feel like we do, that their money cushions them from real pain. But Sarah heard something in that voice that money couldn't fake or fix. She heard a woman on the edge. Sarah gave the address of the diner. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up, and out stepped someone who looked nothing like the glamorous actress from magazine covers. Alexandra wore sweatpants, no makeup, her hair unwashed. Her hands shook as she reached for the door. The moment Max saw her, the professional training vanished. He broke free from Sarah's grip, launching himself at Alexandra with such force they both tumbled onto the diner floor. And there, in front of confused customers and gawking staff, one of Hollywood's most composed stars fell apart completely. She held Max like he was the only thing keeping her tethered to earth because, as Sarah would soon learn, he was. "You don't understand," Alexandra whispered to Sarah, mascara streaming down her face. "He's not just my dog. He's my therapy dog. He's the only reason I'm still here." Have you ever witnessed the moment when someone's public mask completely shatters? When the image dies and the human emerges? That's what happened in that dingy diner, under fluorescent lights surrounded by the smell of burnt coffee and hash browns. Sarah knelt beside them. She didn't pull out her phone like everyone else, didn't try to capture the moment for social media glory. She just placed a gentle hand on Alexandra's shoulder and said, "I know. I could see it in how he looked for you." Alexandra looked up then, really seeing Sarah for the first time. Saw the tired eyes, the worn uniform, the kindness that cost $300 she clearly didn't have. "The vet bill," she said suddenly. "Let me pay you back. Let me give you the reward, please." But Sarah shook her head. Why? Why do some people choose hardship when ease is offered? Maybe because Sarah understood something that Alexandra had forgotten in her world of transactions and contracts. Sometimes the most valuable things can't be bought. Just... Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. Just take care of him, and yourself. That's payment enough. Alexandra stared at this stranger who had saved her lifeline and asked for nothing in return. In her world, everyone wanted something, everyone had an angle. But Sarah was already turning back to her tables, picking up her order pad, returning to a life that Alexandra suddenly realized was probably harder than anything she'd faced. "Wait," Alexandra called out. "At least let me thank you properly. Let me take you to lunch, please. I need to know why you did this." Sarah looked at the clock. Her break was in an hour. She had 45 minutes to serve enough tables to make up for the tips she'd lose. But something in Alexandra's eyes made her nod. Because sometimes the universe puts two people in the same space not by accident, but by design. What happened next would challenge everything both women believed about friendship, privilege, and the power of a single act of kindness to ripple outward in ways no one could predict. They sat in Alexandra's SUV, the tinted windows creating a barrier between two worlds that were about to collide. Max lay across both their laps, his breathing finally calm, creating a bridge neither woman had expected. "I haven't been able to sleep," Alexandra admitted, her fingers running through Max's fur. 3 nights. I thought he was gone forever, like everything else good in my life." You wouldn't think someone with 3 homes, a dozen awards, and millions in the bank could feel like they had nothing. But Sarah heard the hollow echo in those words. She'd heard it before, in her own voice, when life had stripped her down to nothing but survival. "He was looking for you too," Sarah said softly. "Wouldn't eat properly. Kept watching the door. Sometimes love is just that simple, isn't it? Even when everything else is complicated." Alexandra turned sharply, studying this waitress who spoke like a philosopher. "Who are you?" she asked, but not in the way people usually ask. This was deeper. This was really asking. Sarah could have given the simple answer, could have stuck to the facts. Instead, she told the truth. Someone who knows what it's like to lose everything that matters. Someone who couldn't walk past a soul in pain even with 4 legs. The confession that followed would have made headlines if the windows hadn't been so dark, if the world hadn't been locked outside. Alexandra talked about the Oscar curse, how success had cost her everything real. Her marriage crumbled. Her friends revealed as parasites. Her family distant and demanding. "Max is the only one who doesn't care if I bomb at the box office," she laughed bitterly. "He doesn't read the reviews or care about the gossip sites. He just loves me. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Sarah did know. Not because she lived in that world, but because she lived in this one, where authentic love was equally scarce. Where people worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford to care for their sick parents. Where dreams died, not from lack of talent, but lack of opportunity. I was going to be a veterinarian, Sarah found herself saying. Had a full scholarship. Then my mom got cancer, and choices became luxuries I couldn't afford. Why do we tell strangers our deepest truths? Maybe because they can't hurt us with them. Or maybe because sometimes, in the right moment, a stranger is exactly who we need. Alexandra listened, really listened. Not the polite, waiting for your turn to talk listening, but the kind where someone actually hears you. And when Sarah finished, Alexandra asked a question that would change the trajectory of both their lives. What if I told you that saving Max wasn't just about returning a dog? What if I told you that you saved my life too? The pause that followed held the weight of possibility. Because sometimes angels come in designer clothes, and sometimes they come in waitress uniforms, and sometimes they recognize each other despite the disguises. I have a proposition, Alexandra continued, and before you say no because of pride or whatever, just listen. Because I think the universe might be trying to tell us both something here. What she said next would test everything Sarah believed about accepting help, about worthiness, about the price of kindness in a world that usually punishes it. But Max, lying across their laps, seemed to already know what both women were about to discover, that sometimes when you save someone, they save you right back. I want to pay for your veterinary school. The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything Sarah thought she knew about how the world worked. You know that moment when someone offers you exactly what you've dreamed of, but your first instinct is to run? That's the cruelest trick poverty plays on us. It teaches us to distrust generosity, to see kindness as a debt we can't repay. Sarah's immediate response was what you'd expect. I can't accept that, it's too much, I didn't help Max for a reward. But Alexandra leaned forward, her eyes fierce with a determination that had won her 3 Oscars. That's exactly why you should accept it. Do you know how many people in this town would have sold that story to TMZ? Posted videos of Max for clout? Demanded double the reward? The math was staggering. Veterinary school. 8 years. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. For Alexandra, it was what she spent on a single piece of jewelry. For Sarah, it was an impossible dream that had died with her mother's diagnosis. You don't even know me, Sarah protested. What if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough anymore? It's been 3 years since I studied. I pour coffee for a living. Have you ever noticed how we talk ourselves out of miracles? How we become our own worst enemies when opportunity knocks? Alexandra saw it happening and recognized it because she'd done it too, in different ways. You know what I was doing 3 nights ago when Max disappeared? Alexandra's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I was sitting in my bathroom with a bottle of pills, wondering if anyone would even notice if I didn't wake up. That's not dramatic. That's not Hollywood. That's the truth. The weight of that confession changed everything, because suddenly, this wasn't about charity or guilt or even kindness. This was about 2 women saving each other in ways neither had expected. Max ran out when my housekeeper left the gate open, Alexandra continued. I thought it was a sign that even he was leaving me. And then you spent money you didn't have to help him. You slept on the floor so he could have your blanket. You did what was right when it cost you everything. Sarah felt tears she hadn't cried since her mother's funeral, because someone saw her, really saw her. Not the uniform or the tired eyes or the failed dreams, but her. There's one condition, Alexandra said, and Sarah's heart sank because there always was. But what came next surprised her. You have to let me be part of it. Let me watch you become who you were meant to be. Let me remember that good things can still happen, that people like you still exist. Max stirred between them, placing a paw on each of their hands as if sealing a deal he'd orchestrated all along. And maybe he had. Maybe sometimes dogs know things we don't about who needs to meet whom and when. What about your world? Sarah asked. Won't people talk? Judge you for helping some random waitress? Alexandra laughed, but it was free of bitterness for the first time in months. Let them. I've been playing roles my whole life. Maybe it's time I played myself. Starting with helping someone who reminded me that kindness isn't extinct. The decision that followed would ripple outward in ways neither woman could imagine, Because when you throw a stone of genuine goodness into the world's cynical pond, the ripples don't stop where you think they will. They keep going, touching shores you'll never see, changing lives you'll never know about. But first, Sarah had to say yes. She had to believe she was worthy of saving too. 3 months later, Sarah stood in front of UCLA's veterinary program building, acceptance letter trembling in her hands. Behind her, Alexandra waited in the car with Max, both of them grinning like proud parents at a graduation. You think you know how this story goes, don't you? Rich celebrity helps poor waitress. Happy ending, roll credits. But real life doesn't follow Hollywood scripts. Real transformation is messier, harder, and infinitely more beautiful. The first weeks were brutal. Sarah's brain, rusty from 3 years of survival mode, struggled to absorb the complex chemistry and anatomy. She'd study until 3 a.m., wake at 6, and still feel behind. Have you ever wanted something so badly that the fear of failing at it paralyzed you? Alexandra noticed the dark circles, the weight loss, the way Sarah's texts became shorter and less frequent. So she did something that would become the foundation of their unlikely friendship. She showed up, not with cameras or fanfare, but with coffee and flashcards. The Oscar-winning actress sat on Sarah's dorm room floor, quizzing her on parasitology, while Max practiced being a patient for Sarah's clinical skills class. You know, I had to learn 16 pages of dialogue in Mandarin for my last film, Alexandra said one night, watching Sarah struggle with Latin terminology. Want to know the secret? You don't memorize words, you memorize their music. It was such a strange parallel. The actress teaching the future vet how to perform. But it worked. Sarah began to see the rhythms in the medical terms, the storytelling in the symptoms. Her grades climbed. Her confidence grew. But life has a way of testing us right when we think we're safe. The call came on a Tuesday. Rosa from the diner, her voice shaking. Sarah, honey, there's been an accident. Miguel, the young busboy Sarah had trained, had been hit by a car. No insurance. His family, undocumented and terrified, didn't know what to do. The hospital was demanding payment up front for surgery. Sarah stood in the hospital corridor, her new life colliding with her old one. She could stay out of it, focus on her studies, protect this fragile dream Alexandra had given her. Or she could be who she'd always been, someone who couldn't walk past pain. She called Alexandra, not to ask for money but to cry. To admit that leaving her old world behind was harder than she'd thought, that survivor's guilt was real, that success felt like betrayal when people you loved were still drowning. "Where are you?" was all Alexandra asked. 20 minutes later, she walked into that hospital like she owned it, which, given her donations over the years, she practically did. What happened next wasn't just about money changing hands. It was about Alexandra using her power for something real. She didn't just pay Miguel's bills. She got him the best surgeon. She brought in lawyers to help his family. She did what Sarah had done for Max. She refused to walk past someone else's pain. Watching her, Sarah understood something profound. This wasn't charity. This was Alexandra learning to be human again, learning that her privilege could be a tool for healing, not just a prison of expectations. "You're teaching me," Alexandra said later, sitting in the hospital cafeteria while Miguel's surgery continued. "Every day you're teaching me how to see people again, how to be useful, how to matter." Two women from different worlds, teaching each other that success without service is just another form of poverty, that real wealth is measured in the lives you touch, the pain you ease, the hope you restore. And Max? He became the therapy dog for the pediatric ward while they waited, bringing smiles to sick children who didn't care that his owner was famous. Because dogs know what humans forget, that love is the only currency that actually matters. The news broke on a slow Thursday. Oscar winner's secret life. Alexandra Chen funds veterinary dreams for diner waitress. The headlines were exactly what you'd expect, mixing truth with speculation, kindness with gossip. You know how the world loves to diminish genuine goodness, to find angles and ulterior motives where none exist? The story went viral, but not in the way either woman had hoped. Sarah's phone exploded. Suddenly, everyone from high school wanted to reconnect. Distant relatives remembered her existence. The diner where she'd worked was flooded with tourists hoping to sit in the booth where it all started, but the cruelest cuts came from the comments. "Gold digger. Publicity stunt. Pretty convenient finding a celebrity's dog." Have you noticed how the internet's anonymity turns ordinary people into arbiters of others' worthiness? Sarah sat in her dorm room, laptop open to the 1,000th nasty comment, wondering if accepting help had been a mistake, if she should have stayed small, stayed quiet, stayed in her lane. The American dream, it seems, is only celebrated when it's theoretical. Alexandra found her there at midnight crying over anatomy textbooks she couldn't focus on. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down, pulled out her phone, and showed Sarah something that would change her perspective forever. "Look," Alexandra said, scrolling through messages. "Single mom in Ohio, inspired to go back to nursing school. Teenager in Detroit who's going to pursue veterinary medicine because of you. Woman in Phoenix who helped us stray after reading our story." The messages numbered in thousands. Real people, real lives, touched by what the media had tried to cheapen. For every cruel comment, there were 10 quiet souls who saw hope in Sarah's story, who saw possibility in Alexandra's generosity. "They don't matter," Alexandra said, gesturing to the negative comments. "You know what matters? Tomorrow, you're going to learn how to save an animal's life, and someday, some family's beloved pet will live because you didn't let strangers' opinions stop you." But the universe wasn't done testing them. The next morning, Sarah arrived at school to find her car vandalized. "Must be nice" spray painted across the windshield. Someone's jealousy made manifest in destruction. This is the part of the success story nobody tells you. How rising attracts those who want to pull you down. How visibility makes you a target. How every blessing becomes a burden if you let the world's voice drown out your purpose. Sarah almost quit that day. Almost decided the dream wasn't worth the nightmare of public judgment. But then Max did something that reminded her why she'd started this journey. He'd escaped from Alexandra's car and found Sarah in the parking lot, but instead of coming to her, he went to another student's car, barking insistently. Inside, they found a classmate passed out, diabetic emergency, minutes from tragedy. While they waited for paramedics, Sarah's vandalized car forgotten, she realized something profound. Purpose doesn't care about public opinion. Destiny doesn't check comment sections. The animal she'd save wouldn't care how she got to veterinary school, only that she'd arrived. "You know what?" Sarah told Alexandra later as they cleaned paint off her windshield together. "Let them talk. Let them judge. Every minute I spend defending my worth is a minute I'm not studying to save lives." And with that declaration, Sarah Martinez stopped reading comments and started reading textbooks. Because warriors don't win battles by fighting every critic, they win by staying focused on what actually matters. The ripples, meanwhile, kept spreading. Veterinary schools reported increased applications. Animal shelters saw more volunteers. Two women's friendship had accidentally started a movement, proving that sometimes the best revenge against cynicism is simply continuing to do good. 2 years passed. Sarah was now in her clinical rotations, working 18-hour days at the teaching hospital. Alexandra's career had taken an unexpected turn. She'd started producing films about ordinary heroes, stories that Hollywood usually ignored. You'd think time would have normalized their friendship, but some bonds transcend normal. Every Wednesday, without fail, they met for coffee. The Oscar winner and the future veterinarian talking about everything and nothing, while Max dozed at their feet. "I got offered another superhero movie," Alexandra said one autumn morning, sliding the script across the table. 20 million plus back end. My agent says I'd be crazy to pass. Sarah looked at the script, then at her friend. Saw the exhaustion that money couldn't cure, the emptiness that fame couldn't fill. "What does your gut say?" "My gut says I'm tired of playing someone else's hero when there are real ones all around us." Alexandra pulled out a different folder. "I want to fund a program. Full rides for veterinary students from underserved communities. I want to call it the Max Initiative. Have you ever witnessed the moment someone finds their true calling? When success transforms into significance?" Sarah watched it happen across that coffee shop table, tears blurring her vision. "But I need a co-director," Alexandra continued. "Someone who understands both worlds. Someone who knows what it's like to have dreams deferred by circumstance. Know anyone like that?" Sarah laughed through her tears because life's circular poetry was too perfect. The waitress who'd returned a dog was being asked to help return hope to others like her. The universe, it seemed, had been playing a long game. But before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. Emergency at the teaching hospital. A dog had been brought in, hit by a car. No owner in sight. The other students were overwhelmed. Could she come? They raced to the hospital together, Alexandra and Max in tow. What they found would test everything Sarah had learned, not just in veterinary school, but in life. The dog was in bad shape. Worse, it was pregnant. The supervising veterinarian shook his head. Too much damage. The humane thing would be, but Sarah saw something in the dog's eyes. The same determination she'd seen in her mother's. The same fight she'd seen in Max that rainy night. The same refusal to quit that had carried her from diner to doctorate. "Give me 1 hour," she said, with an authority that surprised everyone, including herself. 1 hour to try. What followed was veterinary medicine mixed with sheer will. Sarah's hands, once shaky with coffee cups, now steady with purpose. Her mind, once foggy with exhaustion, now laser-focused on life. Alexandra watched from the observation window, seeing her investment mature into something priceless. Not just the money for school, but the belief in someone's potential. The gift of possibility given wings. 3 hours later, exhausted but exhilarated, Sarah emerged. The dog would live. 5 puppies had been saved. The supervising vet who'd doubted her now looked at her with newfound respect. "How?" he asked. "I've been doing this 30 years. That dog should have been gone." Sarah thought about her answer, about every table she'd waited, every night she'd studied, every cruel comment she'd ignored, about Alexandra's faith and Max's bridge between two worlds. "Sometimes," she said finally, "the ones who've been broken know best how to heal. We see the fight in others because we recognize it in ourselves." That night, the Max Initiative was born. Not in a boardroom or gala, but in a veterinary hospital where hope had won another round against odds. Where 2 women proved that the best partnerships aren't about what you can get, but what you can give together. The first Max Initiative scholarship ceremony took place on a rainy Thursday, eerily similar to the night Sarah had found Max. 50 students from backgrounds like Sarah's, each with stories of dreams deferred but not destroyed. You want to know what real wealth looks like? It's Alexandra Chen, Hollywood royalty, sitting on a folding chair in a community center. Mascara running as student after student shared what this chance meant. There was Maria, daughter of farm workers, who'd been treating animals with home remedies since she was 7. David from inner-city Chicago, who'd turned his life around after his therapy dog saved him from the streets. Keiko, first-generation immigrant, translating for her parents who cried with pride. Sarah stood at the podium, no longer the waitress who'd found a dog, but Dr. Sarah Martinez, DVM, co-director of a program that would change hundreds of lives. The journey from that rainy night to this rainy afternoon had been anything but straight. 4 years ago, she began, her voice steady despite the emotion, I spent my last $300 on a dog that wasn't mine. It was illogical, impractical, some said stupid, but kindness often is all those things. The audience leaned in, because everyone there knew what it was like to make impractical choices for love. To sacrifice for others when you barely had enough for yourself. That act led me to Alexandra, who saw in me what I'd forgotten to see in myself, but more importantly, it taught me that the universe rewards kindness in ways we can't predict or plan for. Alexandra watched from the front row, Max at her feet, both different beings than they'd been that night. The actress had found purpose beyond performance. The dog had found his person. And somehow, they'd all found each other. Each of you, Sarah continued, has been chosen not because of perfect grades or test scores, but because you've shown that same impractical kindness. You've helped when it cost you. You've cared when it was inconvenient. You've proven that the best veterinarians aren't just smart, they're human. Have you ever been in a room where hope becomes tangible? Where you can actually feel dreams taking flight? That's what happened in that community center, with rain drumming on the roof like applause from heaven. But the real magic happened after the ceremony. Alexandra, instead of rushing off to some Hollywood event, stayed, talked to every student, heard every story, made each person feel seen. One mother grabbed Alexandra's hand, speaking through tears. You don't understand. My daughter was going to give up. She was going to settle. You gave her permission to dream again. But Alexandra did understand, because Sarah had given her the same permission to dream beyond red carpets, to matter beyond box office numbers, to use privilege as a tool for lifting others. As the evening wound down, a young man approached Sarah hesitantly. Dr. Martinez, I'm from your old neighborhood. Everyone there talks about you, says you made it out. Sarah smiled, but corrected him gently. I didn't make it out. I made it through. And now I'm reaching back. That's the only success that matters. The ripple effects were already visible. Other celebrities, inspired by Alexandra's example, started similar programs. Veterinary schools began reevaluating their admission criteria. The conversation shifted from who deserved opportunity to how opportunity could find everyone who deserved it. But perhaps the most beautiful moment came at the end, when Max, now graying around the muzzle, made his rounds to each scholarship recipient. As if he knew he'd started all this, as if he was personally welcoming each student to a journey he'd accidentally authored. "You know what's funny?" Alexandra said to Sarah as they cleaned up. "I spent millions making movies about heroes. But the real story was waiting for me at a diner, wearing a stained uniform and holding my dog." 5 years later, the documentary premiered at Sundance. Finding Max, a story of kindness repaid, had been Alexandra's passion project, but she'd insisted on staying behind the camera. This was Sarah's story to tell. You know what's remarkable about watching your life on screen? It's not the big moments that make you cry. It's the small ones you'd forgotten, the security footage of Sarah taking off her jacket to wrap around Max, the vet's testimony about her payment plan, the diner customers who remembered her sneaking food for the dog. But the film was more than their story. It followed 5 Max Initiative scholars through their journeys. Showed the late nights, the failures, the moments of doubt, the real cost of dreams, and the real value of support. "I didn't want a fairy tale," Alexandra had told the director. "I wanted the truth. That kindness is hard, that generosity is complicated, that changing lives is messy work." The premiere audience was unusual for Sundance. Yes, there were industry people and critics. But the front rows were filled with veterinary students, diner workers, and the quiet heroes who'd been part of the journey. Sarah's old boss Rosa was there, wearing her first formal dress. Miguel, the busboy whose accident had taught them about community, now a nursing student himself. The vet who'd treated Max that first night, still stunned that his small clinic had been part of something so large. When the lights came up, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. But what happened next stunned everyone. A standing ovation, not for the film, but for what it represented. For proof that ordinary people doing extraordinary things could still change the world. The Q&A that followed was electric. Someone asked Alexandra why she'd stayed behind the camera. Her answer would become as famous as any movie quote. "I've played heroes my whole career, but Sarah taught me it's better to help create them." A young veterinary student stood up, voice shaking. "Dr. Martinez, what do you say to people who feel like their dreams are too big for their circumstances?" Sarah thought about her mother, who died believing her daughter would make it. About nights serving coffee while memorizing anatomy. About a dog in the rain who'd changed everything. "I say that circumstances are just the first chapter, not the whole story. That the universe conspires to help those who help others. That sometimes when you save someone else, you end up saving yourself." But the most powerful moment came when Max, now elderly and moving slowly, was brought on stage. The audience erupted. This dog, this catalyst, this 4-legged angel who'd orchestrated a miracle simply by getting lost and found. Have you ever seen an entire room understand something profound without words? That's what happened when Max, with creaky joints and clouded eyes, walked directly to a young girl in a wheelchair in the front row. A girl whose assistant's dog had recently died. A girl whose application to the Max Initiative had just been accepted. He placed his gray muzzle in her lap and she buried her face in his fur, sobbing. Because somehow he knew. Somehow he always knew who needed what and when. The reviews were glowing, but they missed the point. This wasn't just a film, it was a movement. A reminder that in a world grown cynical, kindness was still the most radical act possible. Backstage, Sarah and Alexandra stood together, watching the crowd disperse into the Utah night. "You know what's crazy?" Sarah said. "If you'd told me 5 years ago I'd be standing here, you'd have brought me coffee and kept dreaming," Alexandra finished. They laughed, but it was laughter lined with tears, because they both knew how easily this story could have gone unwritten. How many Sarahs never find their Alexandras? How many Maxes never make it home? The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Sarah knew before she answered. You develop an instinct when you work with animals. You know when it's time. Max had been declining for weeks, But his spirit had held on through the premiere, through one last scholarship ceremony, through one more chance to change a life. She found Alexandra already at the veterinary hospital, cradling Max in a blanket Sarah recognized, the same one she'd given him that first night. Full circle. Life's poetry written in worn fabric and gray fur. "He waited for you," Alexandra whispered. "The vet said he should have, but he waited. You think you're prepared for goodbye when you work with animals? You think you understand the bargain, their shorter lives for their deeper love. But when it's the one who changed everything, preparation crumbles into pure grief." Sarah knelt beside them, her hands finding the spots behind Max's ears that still made him sigh contentedly. Even now, even at the end, he was teaching them. About dignity. About grace. About letting go. "Remember what you told me?" Alexandra asked through tears. "That he wasn't just any dog? You were right. He was an angel on assignment, and he completed it perfectly." They talked to him for the next hour, told him about every life he'd touched, every scholarship recipient who'd written to thank him, every animal saved by veterinarians he'd helped create. They painted him a picture of his legacy in whispered words and gentle touches. But Max had one more lesson to teach. As dawn broke through the hospital windows, he lifted his head one last time. Tentar novamente, continuar editar, chapter 11, continued. As dawn broke through the hospital windows, he lifted his head one last time. Not to look at Alexandra or Sarah, but toward the door. There, a young veterinary technician had just arrived for her shift. Marina, one of the first Max Initiative scholars, who'd graduated just months before. Max's tail gave one weak wag. His eyes, clouded but still knowing, fixed on her with purpose. Marina approached slowly, tears already falling. She'd met him at her scholarship ceremony, where he'd stayed by her side the entire evening as if he knew she'd lost her own childhood dog the week before. He was waiting for her too, the attending vet said softly. "I've seen a lot, but I've never seen an animal hold on for so many goodbyes." Marina knelt beside them, completing a circle of souls bound by one dog's infinite capacity to love. She whispered something in Spanish, a prayer her grandmother had taught her for departing spirits. Max's breathing steadied, as if he'd needed to hear those exact words. "You did it, boy," Sarah whispered, her veterinary training battling her breaking heart. "You brought us all together. You can rest now. We've got it from here. Have you ever watched love leave a body? How the light doesn't fade so much as transfer, moving from the one departing to those remaining. That's what happened in that small room as Max took his final breath, surrounded by the lives he'd transformed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of gratitude, of grief, of a love too large for words. Three women from different worlds, brought together by one dog's journey, now bound forever by his leaving. Alexandra broke first, sobbing with an abandon she'd never allowed herself in public. But this wasn't public. This was family. Sarah held her while Marina held them both. And for a moment, the hierarchy of fame and success dissolved into the democracy of loss. "He saved me," Alexandra whispered. "When I thought I had nothing left to give, he showed me I had everything. How do I thank him for that? How do I say goodbye to the being who taught me to live?" Sarah thought of her mother's death, how she'd wondered the same thing. How do you release someone who's woven into your very identity? But now, years later, she had an answer. "We don't say goodbye," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "We say until, and in the meantime, we live the lessons. We pass on the love. We make sure his story never really ends." The sun was fully up now, painting the room golden, and in that light something shifted. The grief remained, but it was joined by something else. Purpose. Promise. The understanding that Max's physical absence would become a different kind of presence. Marina spoke then, her voice carrying the weight of every student Max had inspired. "In my village they say dogs are bridges between heaven and earth. That they show us how to love without condition, so we can teach others when they're gone." Max wasn't just a bridge, he was an architect. He built connections that will outlast us all. They stayed with him until the end, each taking turns sharing stories. Not sad stories, but celebrations. The time he'd stolen an entire sandwich from craft services on Alexandra's set. The way he'd learned to open Sarah's textbooks when she studied too long. How he'd somehow always known which scholarship applicant needed extra attention. And as they prepared to say their physical goodbye, Sarah noticed something that made her gasp. Outside the window, painted across the morning sky, was the most perfect rainbow she'd ever seen. Not a faint suggestion of color, but a bold arc of pure light. Of course, Alexandra laughed through her tears. Even his exit has to be cinematic. They wrapped Max in Sarah's old blanket, the one that had started it all, and prepared for the final journey. But this wasn't an ending. Everyone in that room knew it. This was a transformation, from one dog's life to countless others. From a single act of kindness to a movement of compassion. As they left the hospital, Marina supporting Alexandra while Sarah carried Max one last time, they were met by an unexpected sight. The parking lot was full. Veterinary students, staff, even clients who'd heard the news. All standing in silent tribute to a dog who'd shown them what healing really meant. 1 year later, Sarah stood before a crowd of thousands. The Max initiative had grown beyond veterinary medicine. There were now Max houses near veterinary schools, where students from difficult backgrounds could live affordably. Max clinics in underserved communities, where pets could receive care regardless of their owner's ability to pay. The Max Memorial Fund ensuring no animal would suffer because someone couldn't afford that crucial first vet visit. But today was special. Today they were unveiling something that would have made that lost dog wag his tail in cosmic joy. The Max Center for Human-Animal Bond Studies at UCLA, where the connection between healing animals and healing humans would be studied, celebrated, and strengthened. "We're here because a dog got lost," Sarah began, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Or maybe we're here because a dog knew exactly where he was going. He just took the long way around to teach us something." In the front row, Alexandra sat next to Rosa from the diner, next to Marina, next to dozens of others whose lives had been touched by this unlikely story, each wearing a small golden retriever pin, the symbol of the Max initiative. Each a living testament to the power of connection. Max taught us that kindness isn't a transaction. It's an investment in a future we might never see. That helping someone or something in need isn't about what we get back. It's about who we become in the process. Behind her, a screen showed images. Max as a puppy, Max in the rain, Max at scholarship ceremonies, Max growing gray, Max surrounded by love at the end. But also images of the ripples. Veterinarians in rural areas, inner-city kids learning to care for animals, elderly people whose pets were their only family receiving free care. "They say every dog has its day," Sarah continued. "Max had thousands, not measured in time but in impact. In the lives saved, dreams realized, connections forged. He showed us that love doesn't divide when shared. It multiplies exponentially. Have you ever stood at the culmination of an impossible dream, where every struggle suddenly makes sense, every setback becomes setup, every tear waters future joy?" That's where Sarah stood, a woman who'd once served coffee now serving hope to thousands. Alexandra took the stage next, no longer the polished actress but something more real, something more powerful. "I spent my career pretending to be heroes," she said, "but Max and Sarah taught me that real heroism is quiet. It happens in small moments, in choosing to help when you could walk away, in believing someone deserves a chance when the world says otherwise." She announced the latest expansion, Max International, partnering with animal welfare organizations globally. Because kindness, they'd learned, spoke every language. Because the human-animal bond transcended every border. As the ceremony concluded, something unexpected happened. A dog wandered onto the stage. Not just any dog. A golden retriever, thin and clearly lost, collar jingling with tags. The crowd gasped, some laughing at the cosmic coincidence, others crying at the poetry of it. Sarah knelt, her hands steady and sure. The dog came to her immediately, tail wagging despite its obvious exhaustion. She checked the tags, then looked up with wonder. "Her name is Hope," she announced, "and she's been missing for 3 days." The crowd erupted. Because sometimes the universe isn't subtle. Sometimes it sends you exactly the message you need exactly when you need it. Sometimes it reminds you that every ending is also a beginning. Within minutes, they'd located Hope's owner, a young girl with autism who'd been devastated by the loss. When she arrived, running toward her dog with tears streaming, everyone present understood they were witnessing not just a reunion, but a continuation. "This is what Max wanted," Sarah said to Alexandra as they watched the girl and Hope embrace. "Not monuments or memories, but this, active love, ongoing kindness, stories that keep writing themselves." As the event ended and people dispersed, each carrying the spark of Max's legacy, Sarah noticed something. There in the corner where Hope had entered, a small rainbow caught in the fountain spray, brief, beautiful, perfect. She thought about her mother, who died believing her daughter would make a difference. About a rainy night that changed everything, about how the smallest acts of love create the largest waves of change. "Thank you, Max," she whispered to the rainbow, to the sky, to the universe that had conspired to bring them all together. "Thank you for showing us that every lost soul is just looking for its way home, and that sometimes in helping them find it, we find ourselves." The camera crews were packing up, the stage being dismantled, but the story was just beginning. In veterinary schools across the country, in shelters where hope had been restored, in hearts that had learned to trust again, because Max had taught them the ultimate truth. Love given freely always finds its way back, sometimes as a scholarship, sometimes as a friendship, sometimes as a purpose you never saw coming, but always as proof that kindness is never wasted, that compassion creates miracles, and that every single act of love matters. The rainbow faded, but the light remained, in Sarah's eyes, in Alexandra's mission, in Marina's healing hands, in every life touched by a dog who'd refused to be just a dog. And somewhere, in whatever place good dogs go, Max was surely wagging his tail. His work complete, his legacy assured, his love still rippling outward, touching shores he'd never see but always somehow knew were there. Like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. This channel is for those who believe in the power of small acts